Hi everybody. Today let's continue with the next session of food preservation. Previously we had told about the various principles by which the food can be preserved. We basically relied on two main principles. One is killing the bacteria and the second one is inhibiting the bacteria. And we started with the principles which rely on inhibiting bacteria, that is, we add something so that the growth of the microbes within the food is being prevented. So let's go into the details of this. The first strategy is by lowering the pH of the food. Now many of the foods can be preserved by lowering the pH. Okay, by lowering the pH, what happens? The spoilage as well as the pathogenic bacteria growth is being prevented. And this pH reduction can be achieved by two main methods. One is by the addition of acids and the second one is the process of fermentation. We have different examples of addition of acids. If you go to look into our daily food, okay, regarding to the non-veg varieties, among the food that we prepared, we know that if you take fish, if you prepare a fish curry with a tamarind in it, okay, you need not keep it in the fridge probably overnight. You can just keep it outside, but the fish will not get spoiled. Same way in the case of meat, okay, you have a type of variety of cooking for meat in the case called the buffet variety, in which you are adding acetic acid into it. That food itself is prepared by adding acetic acid or vinegar into that. That also you need not keep it into the fridge. You know, fish as well as meat, they are good sources of protein and normally microbes will rapidly multiply in them. But when you add these acids, now in the case of tamarind you have what, tartaric acid, and in vinegar you are having acetic acid. The growth of the microbes have been prevented over there. Now I am not forgetting about the veggies. Okay, we have in Malayalam we call that as injampuli. Okay, you have ginger over there as well as tamarind, a mixture, a dish which has been made up of ginger as well as tamarind together. Of course, ginger is having an inhibitory role to microbes. At the same time, the tamarind is another thing which will inhibit the growth of the microorganisms. Now coming to fermentation. In fermentation, the classical example which when we look through the textbooks, what we get the example of sauerkraut, that is a fermented cabbage. Okay, now and let me talk about the Indian side. When we have the fermentation, the foods that we prepared by fermentation. Now if you go to look I am talking about the Kerala side dish. If you go to think about pulishere. Pulishere is a dish where you add what? Curd into it. Curd and turmeric is being added. Of course, you add a little bit of garlic and all that. Some ingredients are there in addition to that. Pulishere has a speciality that you don't have to keep it in the fridge. Okay, you can keep it out and you can use it. Okay, it's mainly because the lactic acid which is being present is being produced by the bacteria within it. And when you make pulishere itself, you don't boil it too much, because the main purpose they say is that that curd will curdle off, like it will form coagulates. But that is the reason why they say you don't bubble it. But there's also a second reason, because when you bubble it too much, you will kill the essential microbes within it. And these essential microbes are in turn producing another product called the lactic acid, which will preserve that particular dish. So by lowering the pH, you can in turn preserve food. And there are also, using these principles, of course, you are using different other chemical acids also are being added into this to lower the pH. Now coming to the natural versions, we also have now lime, which has citric acid, and there are malic acid which has been present in some vegetables, which will prevent its spoilage and all that. So the food preservation can be done by lowering its pH by either by adding into it some natural ingredients, or also by adding into it certain other synthetic acids into it. Or you might also you will also add certain microbes which will do fermentation. You know what is fermentation? Fermentation is the breakdown of the carbohydrates under anaerobic conditions into alcohol or lactic acid and carbon dioxide. So let's go into the next principle. The second one that we have is the lowering the water activity. Food preservation by lowering the water activity. Now water activity is something, the amount of water which has been available for the microbes to grow. Now this can be, if you reduce the lower activity beyond a particular level, the microbes cannot grow. Now this can be done by different methods. One is by adding a high content of salt. Okay, salts means it can be of different varieties. Now it can be sodium chloride, sometimes nitrate, sometimes nitrites, like that. Different types of salts can be added to the food. Now let me just take the basic example of sodium chloride. Okay, we add lots of sodium examples for that. Okay, now if you have the salted gooseberry, salted mangoes, salted varieties of fishes, these are all examples where you lower the water activity. And addition of the high content of sugar. Usually when you add more sugar, we consider that, of course, yeah, sugar could also cause fermentation, but there are some sugars which have been found to be hygroscopic, that is, they will absorb more of water and reduce the water activity. So such sugars would also help to preserve the food. Then of course drying, it can be of different ways, either sun or air drying, electrical drying or freeze drying. These are all methods. And one thing that we have to note is that when you try to do food preservation, it's not one exclusive method that you use. That is, not one single method is always being used for food preservation. Sometimes it might be a combination of different methods. Now if I want to tell you one example that we have, we all make kondatam molaga or kondatam chili, the black chili which we dry and we use. Okay, that is mainly prepared by adding curd into the chili, and you add salt, and a bit of curd and salt has been added, and you keep it and you dry it. Okay, so in that food itself, many principles are being linked. Okay, first one is you add salt, that is high salt content. Second one is what? You are drying it. You got the principle of drying. Then the next one, you are adding curd into it. Curd contains what? Lactobacillus. And lactobacillus is something, once it grows on something, it will produce what? Of course, in the case of this particular chili or the kondataka molaga, what we say, that is, what is it? It adds a special flavor to the chili, but at the same time, the inhibitory role of lactobacillus is, or the antibacterial action of lactobacillus is also there. If you go to analyze, okay, in some research you can see that lactobacillus itself is inhibiting the growth of various other microbes, pathogenic microbes, like even I have experience with even MRSA in certain cases, in which what is MRSA? Methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Even in that cases, sometimes the curd lactobacillus is being found to be inhibitory in some research. So when we do the food preservation, you might use a different combination of methods. So the salting, it can be done by different methods. One is by dry cure method, whether the fish or the meat is rubbed with salt. Then the pickling method, where usually 15% of salt has been, the product is immersed in a pickle of brine. That is what I told you, like we have the salted gooseberry or the salted, sometimes you have salted pineapple. It's too tasty. Then you also have the next method of salting called the injection cure, where concentrated salt is injected into the muscles of the meat and all that. Then you have direct addition method. So these are different salting methods. Now the addition of high content of sugar, usually if you look, monosaccharides such as glucose or dextrose and fructose, they are more effective in reducing the water activity than the disaccharides and sugars. And thermophores are more susceptible to the action of sugar than the other bacteria. Osmophilic yeast are able to tolerate very high concentration of sugar, and they can cause food spoilage. So yeast could probably grow if there is a high amount of sugar. And another variety that you can notice, sometimes we also use honey as a preservative. That is, after the foods which have been immersed in honey, honey also is having an antibacterial activity, and it is hygroscopic. That is, what is it? Will absorb all the water and prevent the water available for the microbial growth will be found to be very much less. And in sugars also, you also have certain organic sugars like polyethylene glycol, which will also absorb all the water which has been available. Okay, So that's about the sugars. There are lots of examples in that. Now coming to the preservation by the use of low temperatures. Low temperatures, we know either it can be by chilling or by freezing. Chilling is keeping the food at a temperature of about 0 to 15 degrees centigrade, and common chilling temperatures will be 4 to 5 degrees centigrade, but you can go up to 0 to 15 also is possible. Then when freezing, it normally is 0 to minus 35 degrees centigrade. Okay, and some of the freezers can also go to okay, beyond that also we have certain freezers. So you can either chill it or you can freeze it. In both these conditions, what happens, sometimes minus degrees will also go, and what happens is you mainly tries to reduce the metabolic activity of the microbes within the food. Now coming to the effect of low temperatures. Low temperatures are used to retard the chemical reactions and the actions of the food enzymes, and to slow down or stop the growth or activity of the microbes in the food. A low enough temperature will prevent the growth of any microbes, and the spores, which are not usually injured at all by freezing, however, but most parasites are being killed by freezing. So this is about the inhibition principle. We will be talking about the killing principle in the next video. Thank you.